moving on to participation-focused practice. So hands up if this is a familiar kind of concept, the idea of evidence-based practice, evidence-based best practice rehab with kids, or adults for that matter. Yep. Focuses on participation in the lived environment. So yes, families lead goal setting. So that family-led, family involvement is that mainstay of our practice in terms of family-centered. But also we are, the research directs us to frame goals, the focus of our work with family, whether you call them goals or a different term, so that they reflect change in the lived environment. Home, school, community, the environments that children and family live in. Now, the reason this is even a thing is because historically, we think back to like the 1950s, we've been really strongly encouraged to be highly, body part focused in our practice. So this diagram here, for some reason my animations don't quite work there. It's not supposed to have those boxes yet. Sorry about that. But if you just think about the black figure at the background, this is the ICF, the International Classification of Functioning, Disability and Health. It's important because it's developed by the World Health Organization. It's how they classify, group, make sense of research evidence, funding decisions, any kind of decision making, policy writing, the whole lot for relating to people around their health and disability services, deciding what to fund, what to report on. And so it's how researchers also frame the research that they're providing for you to guide your clinical practice. Does this intervention, for example, make a difference to the way people participate in society, or it doesn't make a difference to a body part, like how effectively the wrist moves, how long a person can stand for? That's an activity. And so it's separating out those concepts that we've kind of historically clumped together. And overall, services are very much still designed around this idea of changing body structures and functions. There's an impairment to the body structure and functions. So therefore, an assumption is often made about this person's participation in society, in life roles, life context is going to be reduced. Now, volumes of research show that that is not the case, that it's not a linear process. Hands up if you've got some kind of impairment, some kind of difference that's maybe amazing, fit in the gifted category with some dimension about your body structure, your body function, the way your body moves, the way your mind works, or might be, a deficit, something that's not quite as flash as other things about you that might sit slightly to the left of the bell-shaped curve of what is normal for us. So these ideas, the research indicates really clearly that even if we change a body structure or body function, we maybe improve the attention span on an attention test of a child with ADHD, that does not mean that they will necessarily participate more fully in society. Similarly, somebody can have all the most awesome capacities, born like an Olympic athlete, got everything going on, and they're having a really miserable time participating in society, feel excluded, unable to take part and be involved. And so for a lot of us, this is where you put your hand up about how old you are. A lot of us were very much trained in models and ways of working and thinking that was basically, if we can just fix the impairment, then that we'll resolve the issues this person is having around taking part at school, being a part of the classroom and included, having a soccer team that they can be a member of, feeling a full member of their family, the family feeling a full member of their community, able to get to festivals, get into church, get into school, being able to take part in things. So the goalposts used to be here, I would say, and this is still a legacy in our practices, that all we have to do is change something in the body structures and functions, or change something in their activities, that the child can do up buttons, for example. Well, that is in itself is just an activity. You could also get a Velcro shirt, and then the child is able to, or something stretchy, and the able child is able to be an independent self-dresser the mum's able to get to work on time, getting to work, being somebody that looks after themselves. These are life roles. Sometimes in therapy, we've gotten quite hung up on the body structures and functions and the activity. There's a bit of a story to that, of course, around what we take ownership of as a health professional, but the memo, loud and clear from the thought leaders, I guess you could call them, around child disability is around making a difference in the way people live their lives as fully as they want to, in the things that are important to them. And the way that's represented in this ICF is around participation in the lived environment, at home, school, or community. And this is what goals would look like when they're framed in this kind of way, around the things that are important to the family, but they reflect an activity that the person does in the context of their lives. So if you've thought of if you have a goal that, in order to know that it's achieved, you have to watch it, or you have to be in your special clinic that can measure it really precisely, that is not a participation focused goal. That is very much an activity focused goal, where it's done under ideal conditions, divorced from the context. So it's not around long-term goals and short-term goals, because remember that continuum I was just saying through, it is not a linear process. If we have goals that reflect participation in society from the outset, we are more likely to work alongside families as they achieve these differences in the way that they participate in life. Would go about the goal very differently if it was, I could play in my soccer team with no pain, as opposed to, I'll have full extension at the hip and no pain. These are very different types of goals. I might never have left my lounge in my wheelchair and have achieved a goal of no pain and, whatever degrees of extension at the hip. I would definitely have left my armchair and been out there amongst it and potentially got splattered with some fantastic mud at the soccer pitch if I have gone and taken part in soccer with minimal pain, or only just taken part in soccer and still trying to cope with the pain or learn strategies to minimize it. These statements that are in the boxes here, they come from an audit of goal setting that I did in the last couple of years of paediatric rehabilitation services in New Zealand, which some of your services took part in. The majority of goals that came out of that survey indicated that we are still tending to prioritise trying to targeting changes in body structures and functions or activities in really controlled conditions, rather than targeting changes in the lived environment, in the activities and contexts that are important to families in the way that we set goals. Any comments on that? Any comments, discussion?
Only question I've got for you, Fee, is how do we match that, what we know is best practice, with our service provision and our service guidelines around writing those SMART goals?
Well, Morgan, it was brilliant, talented, strong, determined people like yourself that wrote those service goals in the past. And it is brilliant, talented, strong, determined people like yourself who are going to change them. That's my perspective. Any additions? Food for thought. So the banner that came up in the orange, that the kinds of goals reflect what is really important to families, right? And in best practice, what we're aiming for is to express them at the level of an activity and a context. Now, this is useful both in keeping us honest, to keep the focus on what's important to the family in the family's actual lives. And it's also useful in terms of behaviour change strategies, both for ourselves and for the family. So we're repeatedly describing exactly what we want to get to in life. And when we do that, people are much more likely to make steps towards it. So there's a sort of twofold effect there both in sort of keeping the focus on the ultimate outcome. I'm not saying, oh, one day maybe the school therapist will get around to that actually happening in the lived environment. But right now, well, I only work with 3-year-olds, or I only work with 5-year-olds, or I only work with 8-year-olds, or I only work with whatever. Someone else will be around at the time that it really comes to fruition. So that that one day never comes, essentially, is the message that the qualitative literature repeatedly tells us from families. So keeping things as long-term goals, short-term, long-term goals, that is really subscribing to that now defunct idea of this linear process. If we change the body structures and functions, it will change the way someone does the activity, and it will change the way somebody engages in society. That is a falsehood. That is not accurate. It is more about the person and exactly how they engage in the context of their lives. So going directly to the goal, targeting that. I think Iona Novak coined the phrase, you gain what you train. If you want to see changes in range of movement at the elbow, then spend a lot of time looking and moving the elbow. If you want to see changes in a person's participation in the society, then spend a lot of time attempting to participate in society and addressing the barriers that come up in trying to do that. So that idea of activity in a context is really like the low bar, like an absolute minimum in the way that goals are framed, or the way that what we target in therapy. What we're really, the essence of this idea of participation are that people are doing a thing that matters to them in the context of their lives and the places where they live and engage. And it's really that doing that bit that matters is ultimately the core concept. So what that might look like, and again, Christine Imms in Australia, Gayla Kilgore here in New Zealand are real international thought leaders in this whole area, thinking about what does the target of our work, the focus of our work look like in best practice? Well, it's about being, it's more meaningful. We often struggle this in terms of sort of being smart. I think that's what you might have been alluding to, Morgan, that SMART acronym in goal setting, which has got very poor evidence base supporting it in health, but it's about it being meaningful, has far more evidence supporting it. So if there's ever a toss-up, go for meaningful. It's about the child is first of all is there, that they're able to be present. They're welcome in the soccer team. There is a place for them. They're welcome in the kohanga at the school. The school is going to embrace this child and family as people with things to contribute to the team and to the community. So being present, working through many barriers about being present in the mainstream classroom, if that's where the family want to be, and not off in a special classroom. That might be around being in a wider range of contexts or situations or environments. I'm keeping this kind of a little bit broad so that you can think about how it applies to you locally. And what would this mean if family were Māori as well? Being more involved. So describing goals that are around being more connected with others, that doing it with friends, there are more people there. Being more engaged, more on task for longer, more involved in the way that the activity is happening. Instead of being a bystander or holding the oranges on the soccer team, they've actually got a position on the field. And being more satisfied. It is really, really okay that these kind of dimensions are represented in goal statements. If nothing else, slap a 10-point scale on it if you've got to measure it. That is really, really easy to do with just about any statement that reflects what's meaningful to families, and it is well supported by research evidence overall. I'm not going to teach the F words, but if you're not familiar with them, then this is really definitely worth looking up. This is put forward by Peter Rosenbaum, another thought leader in this area, as a sort of a perhaps some ways more accessible language applied to children and families around that same stuff that's in the ICF. It's the same stuff, it's just represented in a different way. And he came up with these F words with one of his colleagues, Jan Gorter, because these are the things repeatedly coming up as things that are changeable. Fitness is changeable. Making a leg or a limb work when it's got no nervous system going to it is not particularly changeable. We know that from the research evidence. So focusing in on the things that are changeable for the families and for young people as well, and thinking about that in relation to the ICF. Asking families what's important to them and how we might do this on telehealth. Well, first of all, we should do this, and we know from the recent audit in New Zealand that most people don't do this, but measuring in some way, where's the family at now and where are we trying to get to? So as I said, a 10-point scale. Here's a little clip of Lucy doing this with my son Theo around trying to get to sleep at night over telehealth. It's one of the videos that you would have seen if you've watched them, and you'll see how she so actively engages my son in having this conversation about where are you at with this? Where is this now, and where do you want to get to, and really crystallizing that for him. There's another couple of tools here that you can use. There are numbers of them. Many services use the Canadian Occupational Performance Measure. It's just a 10-point scale essentially. The family goal setting tool, when families really have difficult with the whole idea of goal. I don't know, what do you mean? We're just boxing on. It's using a kind of a card sort system to help people to start to think about what's going really well in my life, what's important to me, what's really not important to me. And it's picture based, so it's less, it doesn't require a lot of language. This tool here, it's called Same View. Mindy's going to talk to this a little bit later. It's an app developed by a parent of a child with autism where the family actually own the online system of what the goals are and who's going to have access to it and being able to share it. So really embracing that family agency. There's also things like the goal-based outcome measure as well, the goal-based outcome tool, very similar to the COPM 10-point scale. So we can start to let go of thinking we need to be really reductive about things, really, really, really specific in order that they are measurable, that we can measure change, which we often get a bit hung up on as health professionals, and at the cost of what's important to this family, what's really meaningful to them. Because if we, put it into a 10-point scale, even if the words are a bit sort of fuzzy and ill-defined, if we're coming back to those same words later and asking that 10-point scale again, people are remarkably consistent in the way that they remember and refer back to that. I want you to mentally go through a little mini self-audit on some of the things that we've been thinking about so far. Have a think about some of those action statements that we've talked about around goals. You can take your pick doing it around, focusing on participation, engagement with Māori, and family-centered practice. Around what do I do? What do I do now? What specifically do I do now that aligns with what we've been talking about today? What could I do differently? What's the next step?